Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Blender Robot Manufactory. And on today's episode, we're going to be continuing with our project Into the Machine, where I'll be modeling some gears on a pretty cool mechanism we've been working on in the last two episodes. So for our projects list, we're currently on Into the Machine. And I'm really hoping we'll finish that up today. We might even get started on making a robot. So, it's pretty much all model now, and we're just going to be doing some animation, doing rigging. It's going to be fun. Hey there, my name's Jory, and this is the Blender Robot Manufactory. I'm a 3D artist and game designer currently making a roguelike platformer in Unity 3D. On this live stream, I give a window into my process of creating models in Blender. We'll be learning the basic commands and techniques I use to create a range of designs for my video game, from furniture to robots to animated human characters. I'll also show how I create models for use in 3D printing. Since we'll be focusing on my personal workflow, this channel will not be a comprehensive course, and many features of Blender will never be covered. However, this channel is meant to be a great jumping off point if you've never used Blender before. We'll also be covering topics that are interesting at any skill level, like what makes a good design, how to generate ideas for unique creations, and how to compose shapes in three-dimensional space to create models that look great from any angle. So whether you've never made a 3D model and would love to learn, you've been doing it for years, or you just want to hang out, relax, and enjoy my process, please tune into the Blender Robot Manufactory on Twitch TV. Alright, so we're back in Blender, and as you can see, I've made just a few changes since the last time. I just wanted to get a camera over here so that we can get a nice look at what the model looks like when we're zoomed out. So you see I can move around in this view, and the other one stays zoomed out. So hopefully that'll give another perspective on how this thing's changing as we work with it. So like I said, that's probably just going to be animation today. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is, you see over here, we have a lot of things called circle, a lot of things called cube. So I think I'd like to change the names of those to, something a little more recognizable before we get started. And remember, we were putting some extra parts over on this layer the last time. I think we're pretty much done modeling, so I'm just going to delete those now. So just pressing A for all and delete. City of Corridors says prepare for trouble. I don't know, it might be some trouble. I'm hoping the animation goes smoothly. How are you doing today? So let's see what we got here. So this is just called circle. I'm actually going to go ahead and merge everything together that, that isn't moving independently of each other. Prepare for trouble because I made the parts double. So we also actually have the chat window on screen now. I figured I could cram it into that corner now that I am showing a zoomed out version of the model. So if you're watching in full screen mode, you can tell what people are saying now. So let's see, just looking at everything that moves together and putting it on the same layer. So this one's definitely going to be its own thing. I'm calling it the hopper right now. But let's just go over and change the name to top piece, or just top. And then going down to the gear, that's its own piece. So I'm double clicking on this and calling it the gear. Now I'm just clicking on this eyeball here and making those invisible for a moment. And I don't believe any of these are moving independently, though I might make a little bit of a wobble on these, on some of this stuff when the top piece clicks into place. So I think I can just select all of these with A and do Control. Oh, actually, I'm undoing that. So I can merge most of these together. But I just remember that the glass here is going to be its own, material when I put this in Unity 3D. And the reason for that is I need to put it on its own material or it won't be transparent. So I'm selecting everything except glass, Control J for join, and active object is not a selected mesh. Let's try that again. So select them all. There we go. And J for join. And it looks like all of that is nice and joined together now. And thank you for J for joining me today. That's just one of the many puns you'll get for watching the Blender Robot Manufactory TM trademark. So, let me see. Now we are making these other parts visible. And, let me think what to call this. We'll just, call this, frame. There we go. And, frame, I'll uncapitalize this. There we go. And let me see, so now we're down to 4 parts. Just gonna make a save of this before we continue. And let me see what else. So now I'm going to go through these and make sure their transforms are in a good place before I start trying to animate these. So what have we got first? The frame, this one is just going to be stationary. So you see the location, rotation, and scale are all different numbers. So I'm just going to apply location, apply rotation, apply scale, and get those transforms all applied. Now this part's just moving up and down, so I can also apply everything to the top. The glass isn't moving, so I can do that as well. Let me see. So the only other part is this gear right here. And remember in a previous episode I said that you want to apply your transform unless you have a really good reason not to do that. And in this case, we actually do have a good reason not to apply our location. And the reason for that is when I press R, you see this gear is rotating around this yellow dot, which is the origin in the center. And that's actually something I want it to keep doing. You see that we have the center of our 3D view right here when this blue z-axis and red x-axis meet. And that's not where the center of the gear is, so let me just show you what would happen if I applied this location. I press Control A for apply location, and now if I press R, you see my gears rotating around that center point, which isn't what we want in this case, so I'm pressing Control Z to undo that. So, like I said, there's some situations where you don't want to apply your transforms, but in general, you know, if you don't know of a good reason not to apply them, you're going to be applying them. And the other thing I'm going to do before I start animating, actually should have done this first, was when this thing gets placed down by the blue z-axis. What's a blue z-axis? So, oh, the blue axis. The blue axis has been drinking. When I use the level generator when I use the level generator to place this object into the game I'm making, it always puts it on top of a tile at the origin. And in this case, I'm going to want this little box here where the wires are going to be coming out of at the origin. So I just moved that part up to the center of it. And that reminds me there's one other thing I'm going to want to do before I start really working on this. So now I'm going to just append something to show me where the back wall is in Unity 3D. Forget exactly how far back that is in the game I'm making. So I'm just opening up, see, I have all my alcoves set to be on the back wall. Let me see what I got. Blackboard's pretty good. So sometimes I just actually going to be putting in a different part from that. Append. There we go. So actually that's not a good piece. Let me just think about this. Might be just a moment to figure out where the back wall is. So, Unity projects, creator create, assets, quarters. There we go. So, just applying this bed, and the back wall is going to be just about there. So, it looks like I actually opened that. We're going back to our other project that we've been working on the stream. Right, so that is in Blender Robot Manufactory. We are going down to models, opening this back up, and just selecting all of these, moving this up here. There we go. And I may have already done this. That looks about right, but we're just going to make sure this is really lined up with the back wall. There we go. So just selecting all of this and moving it back. But not this piece. Moving all of this here. There we go. Just going to delete this. And the final thing I'm going to do is I am going to pull all of these pieces that contact the wall back just a little bit so that to make sure they really go into the wall and we don't get any gaps there. So I'm just pulling these back a bit, and that should really contact the wall nicely. And a lot of times I kind of need to go in the game and move things around a little in Blender and just make sure everything is, you know, really solidly oriented where it needs to be. So again, we're applying all of these. The gear is fine where it is. Applying the glass and applying the top piece. There we go, and the gear can still rotate freely. So now it's time to start making an armature for this. So I'm just going to move these over a little bit, and in order to do that, I am pulling this out, going up, and in the Create menu, we're just looking for armature. There we go. I'm going to move this to the center of the scene. There we go. And let me think about this. So I think I'm going to make a root bone because Unity 3D always wants everything to be assigned to a bone, and it doesn't really like it if you have anything there that isn't assigned to a bone. So I'm just going to get that as unobtrusive as possible, apply the rotation, and that can just be our root bone. So I'm going to go into this, and I'll rename the bone over here in our bone menu to root, just to tell me that only stationary parts go there. Now I'm going to be placing another bone on our gear here. So you see this still has its origin right in the center of it. So I'm using my cursor mode, Shift S, and going down to cursor to selected. So you see that cursor is right where the gear is. And now I can make a bone by just pressing armature again. You see that is right in the center of the gear. And I'm going over to our armature menu, this little stick figure here. And I'm going to press X-ray here so it shows up through all of the models. And I'll just pull this up a little so we can see it better sticking out of the gear. So that's our gear bone. So we're going to rename it gear. And let's see what else we need. So we're going to need another bone that's moving up and down with this top piece. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just, first of all, I'm going to make sure these are the same armature. So I'll just click this, shift right click this, and Control J for join. And then I'm going to Shift D to duplicate this bone, just move it up here, and maybe move it over here just so that, so we can see it's a different bone. So, where do I want this? Maybe right there. Just keep it separated from the gear a little. And then we're going to rename this one to top piece. There we go. And what else do we need? So we're going to want this wire to, it's going to be doing two things. So we want it to follow this piece as the gear rotates around. If I pull this out, you can see it's not actually connected to that. So I'm going to be rigging up this wire to follow the gear down. And besides that, the only other bones we might need are maybe a little bit of jiggle here, or, make the frame jitter a little as this thing's going down, just to, make it feel a little more solid, a little more physical. And in case you're just joining me for the first time, what we're making is going to be a pressure switch in the roguelike platformer I'm making. So how it works is the player puts an object onto this platform, and then it moves down with the weight of the object. The gear rotates with it, and if the object is heavy enough, and this goes all the way here, it sends an electric signal because these two pieces meet. And that's going to be used for all kinds of things in the game, like opening doors, setting traps, electrifying floors, pretty much anything we need an electric signal for. So now we're going to be rigging up this wire. So I think I'll just Shift D to copy this one again. And I'm just going to be moving this bone over here and just grabbing this around, just to get it started. And the way I'm going to be rigging this up is pretty much each time I have like a little kink in the wire, I'm going to be making a separate bone here. And, if it turns out this looks a little jagged at the resolution, we're going to view it in the game where it's zoomed out here. I might even make some extra divisions in the wire. But, just because this is supposed to be, not little individual segments, but rather a smooth rope, we're going to need quite a few bones going down here. And then it meets right there. And now, let me see. I'm also going to move these over just so that they basically line up with where the wire is in resting position. So just moving all these back. There we go. And also this one. And that's pretty good. So now we're going to set up some inverse kinematics. And what that is going to do is when this piece on the gear moves around, the wire is going to follow it with the inverse kinematics. So we won't need to manually move this around to, make sure it still looks like it's connected. So in order to get a bone that's just in the right place for that, I believe I just press E for extrude, move that. I'll just move this over here, make it clear it's a different piece. And then armature, separate bones, and if I am correct, this should, yeah, it's a separate piece now. So that's just in the right place. And I'm just going to put this back in the same armature, just join those together again. And I like to keep all of my bones nicely named, so we're just going to call this wire IK, and then I'm just going to name all of these ones going down. So wire, it'll start at 0. So wire 0, wire 1, 2. I'm just going down and naming all of these 3, 4, 5, and 6. Let me see, and I think that's that should be enough bones to get started. Like I said, I might add a few other little flourishes here, but that should basically do it. So let me make sure these are all part of the same armature. It looks like they are. So now we're going to be adding some bone constraints. So this one, I believe, is going to need IK. So see if I remember how to do this. There we go. So I just go down here, and when I'm in edit mode working with the bones, I just click here and click to pose mode. Or another way I like to do that is in edit mode when working with the bones, Control Tab will also go into pose mode. And here you see we have right next to the bone tab, we have a bone with a little chain on it, and that's our bone constraints. So remember I said we want to add inverse kinematics to this, so that's why I'm adding. And then, see, I'll just, before we get started with that, I'll just rename this to armature. And if I had more than one in the scene, I'd probably want to name it something a little more specific than, just armature. So, saving again because I'm neurotic. And our target for this bone is going to be armature. Now you see under that it's asking for another bone. And remember we called this one wire IK, so that's the one it's going to be following. Let me just show you what this looks like. So this is pretty good actually. So when I pull this around, you can see we got that chain of bones just following it around. And that's exactly what we want. So I'm going to press Alt-G to move that back into place. Now, I like to specify the chain length, even though it seems to be doing fine here. So we have, well, let's just move this over and see what kind of chain length length we have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now you can see all 7 of those are moving with this. Alt-G to put it back into place. And do we want anything else in IK? Let's see if I pull that out. That actually seems to be doing pretty good with its movement. So go back to this. And yeah, I think that's about right. So now when I move this gear around, it's not hooked up to the gear yet. But when I rotate this around, we're going to want this this wire moving with the gear. So Control Z to undo that. So how I do that is I'm going back into edit mode, and I select this IK bone here, shift right click the gear bone, and Control P to parent, and then we want to keep the offset. So let's see what happens when that gear rotates again. I rotate it, and these wires just move along with it. And you can see it's not long enough right now, but remember that the gear won't just be rotating on its own, but this piece will be coming down as the gear rotates. So that also means we need to parent something else. So remember that this wire is attached to this top piece. So when this moves down, I'd also like this wire to move. So selecting this, shift right click this top piece, then Control P to parent, keep the offset. Let's see what happens there. So I move this down, and you can see that wire is moving down nicely. I rotate the gear bone, and that works too. And this will be a little clearer once we actually rig everything up here. So let me think if there's anything else I need to do. I also could put some constraints here to make sure that this top piece can only go up and down, or to make sure that this gear can only rotate around. And if you're modeling this and passing it off to a different animator, that might be a good idea. But since I'm the only one working on the project, I'll just leave them free. And you know, the only reason I would force it to stay on just one rotation axis would be if, you know, this were rotated around in a weird direction, and, you know, that were the only way that I can make sure it, you know, stayed rotating nicely in place, even when I was moving all over the place. But that shouldn't really be an issue with this model, so let's keep going. And what else do I need to do? So I think we're actually ready to start rigging this up. And like I said, we might add a few other bones once we get this basic animation going properly. So now for this piece, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, going over to modifiers, add modifier, and we just add an armature to this. So I'm going to select armature. And there's some ways to do this more automatically, where it selects bone weights for you. But, you know, this is a mechanical piece, so I'd like to be pretty deliberate with how each piece is affecting things. So I'm going to just, in the object, I'm going to select armature. And that's for if you have more than one armature in your scene, you can tell it which armature you're using. And armature is just another word for this collection of bones that's going to tell this model how it's supposed to be animating. And now I believe we're ready to start actually rigging this up. So I click on this bone, and you can see I'm in pose mode. So in pose mode with this bone selected, I shift right click on this top piece. And actually, I think I'd like to get rid of or make invisible the other pieces while I do this. And now I believe Control Tab, and that puts us into weight paint mode. Again, we could also go down here and just select weight paint. Now you see this whole thing turns blue, and that's because now this is showing our bone weights. So blue is no bone weight, red is the most possible bone weight. And let me show you what that means. So if I go over here, we have a tab up here called Tools for the bone weights. And you can see it has a bunch of different options. So if I pull this tab out on radius, you can see my circle's bigger. So we have a big brush to paint bone weights. Move this down and we have a tinier brush. You can also press F on your keyboard to scale this brush up and down. And we also have strength. So if I have it at 1, it's going to be applying a lot of weight. If I move this down, it's not going to be applying much, but I'm going to leave it at 1 for now. And finally, we have blend. So that's how you want to be adding bone weights. And I usually use a lot of add and subtract and not a whole lot of the rest of them. But these other options are definitely worth looking into if you're interested in learning how to rig up models for animating. So now we're going to go to add, and if I just left click here, you can see it made some red here. Now if I press G and pull this bone around, you can see the parts that I turned red are following it now. And that's how we set up a model so it knows that pieces of it are supposed to be following this bone. So now I think I just want pretty much everything except this one wire to be following this bone. And I press C for wireframe. That lets me see the individual vertices, which is usually a little better for setting weights, which is also well, actually, the process of making the armature and doing this is called rigging. So I'm just going all around and making sure that everything except that wire is going to be this red color, meaning that's entirely on the one bone. So just going over here, making sure it's all on here. And it looks like I might have clipped this a little bit, maybe not. And a nice trick that I like to use for this is I just press G to pull this bone over here. Now you can see everything's just following that if it's set to be on the same bone as that one. And just moving around. And of course, that trick only works if you're trying to put a bunch of your vertices on 100% weight. So we're almost there, just moving this around, trying not to hit the wire. And then these ones are a little bit close, but we'll see if we can get these. And there we go. So now that all of these are on the bone, I really don't need to make these all perfectly red since they're not on any other bone. But just to be thorough, I'm going to go ahead and do that. There we go. That's looking pretty good. So now you can see when I pull this around, all of that follows it. So now, what I'm going to be doing is just going down here and I'm going to add each individual piece of this wire to this armature. And maybe I'll actually try to do that, no, I'll do it manually. It won't take too long. So since I want this wire to be a little more flexible looking, I'm not going to use 100% bone weight. I'm bringing it down to like 0.34. But I'm still just going to be adding. So I'm clicking around there, getting those to the top of the bone. And I'll go ahead and do these as well. And I'm just doing this when it's pulled over here to make sure I'm being really deliberate about only adding these weights where I want them. So now for this bone, I'm going to want to just target the lower parts of this segment. So just clicking here, moving over here, getting this one and this one. There we go. So now I can just move this back with Alt-G. So now I'm just going to go down and let me see what we got here. So it looks like I actually put that too high up. So going over to subtract and getting rid of those. There we go. Going back to this one. Going to add and just putting a little weight at the bottom of the bone. And basically my only goal here is that each bone has some weight in all of the segments that surround it. So just going down here, giving this one some weight. And like I said, I probably should have done this so it automatically set the weight for this flexible piece, but since it's mostly rigid, it's not too much trouble with this model to do that manually. Going down here, doing the same thing. There we go. My goggles are falling down. So now just doing these. And this one, almost there. This is probably going to be the most tedious part of this whole model. But it shouldn't be too bad. And go in here. You know, in the game recently, I've been working on the wires a lot, so I just made it so that I can place down wire systems in the level editor, and when the wires are turned on, a little particle effect of electricity goes through them. Starting to look pretty good, so with any luck, I'll actually be able to get this pressure switch into the game pretty quickly. So now I'm just going to these and finishing it up just about there. And this one as well. Cool. So now let's have a look at if this is actually what we want. So I'm clicking on this bone, and that's actually looking really nice. I move this down, and you know, this top piece slides down, all of it's following the bone. This wire is flexing nicely, just like it should. So I'm pretty happy with that. Just going to go over to my bone constraints and make, whoa, don't want to do that. Okay, so yeah, this is looking good. So Alt G to ungrab that. And what else do we need to do? So we're going to our gear bone next. This shouldn't take too long. Just going to make the top invisible since that's rigged up. And then we're going down to our gear, making that visible. And pretty much the entire gear is going to be rotating with this one bone, so that should be easy. Again, I'm just adding a armature modifier to this, and under Object, selecting the one armature. So I click this bone, make sure I'm in pose mode down here, and then I shift right click the gear, and then control tab for weight mode. And again, all of these modes, you don't really need to remember the hotkeys. You can access all of them from this little drop down here. So now I'm going to pull out these tools again. We're adding, and since we don't want some of it following one bone, some of it following another bone, we're going to a strength of 1, which is as high as it goes. F to make this brush really big. You see the radius gets larger. And I'm just holding down my left mouse button, going all over this to make sure that all the vertices in here are on this gear. And I can even grab and rotate this around to make sure it's following the bone. So just select it all, Alt R to unrotate it, Alt G to ungrab it, and that's back in place. So now I believe we have a few more bones we want to set up. But let's have a look at what we have. So most of the big moving parts are already set up. So I think the rest of this is going to be things that I don't want moving. So we're making the gear invisible, making the frame, wait, no, not the frame. We're making the top invisible, and I think I'll just put all of these onto the root bone for now. And let me see. Just thinking if I want to add a little extra flair to this. I think I'll just leave it like this for now. So we are adding another armature modifier to this, selecting our armature, and now remember I just select this bone in pose mode, shift right click on the parts that I want to follow the bone, and then go over to weight paint to weight paint this all. And I'm just going to weight paint all of that because I want all of this to be set up to follow this root bone. And again, the root bone won't actually be moving, but I still want these attached to it because otherwise Andy is going to try to attach these pieces to another one of my bones, which would really look bad. So Alt G to ungrab that. And this, let me see, this doesn't actually need that. There we go. And, the reason I'm even worrying about the root bone right here is because I'm eventually going to set it up so that the frame, the gear, and the top part are all the same game object. And this is just going to make it a little bit easier for Unity to render all of this. I can put it all on the same material. But that's going to be the very last step because it really is useful to have these as separate objects for working in Blender. So now making those invisible again. And the glass can stay on its own piece. All these are good. So we might actually be ready to start animating this. So now I am just going to save it as a new file. Get this out of the way. Get this out of the way. And to start the animation off, I'm going to go down here to these little 3 lines in the lower left corner. And I'm just going to pull these up to get a new window. So you can see right now it's the 3D view, which we don't want. So I'm clicking on this cube in the corner, brings up a bunch of options. And the dope sheet is what we're going to want to get started with this. So I'm in the habit of making multiple animations per object. So even though this object is only going to have one animation for now, I'm still setting it up so that if I wanted another animation, it would be really easy to add it. And so in order to do that, I'm going down here where it says Dope Sheet, and I'm clicking on it and going up to the Action Editor. And that's what we're going to need to make multiple animations. So I'm pressing New for a new animation. And I'll just be clicking down here where it says Action. And, oh, what can I call this? How about move down? There we go. And I really gotta get in the habit of turning off my screen keys before I type something. So now I just pressed F over here. You see it says save this data block even if it has no users. And that's important for making sure this animation gets saved properly. So now that we got this all set up as an animation, we are going to go down here to our timeline, and all of these numbers at the bottom are frames along our animation. And I think that, let me think how many frames this should be. Probably 40 is a good number. And Unity likes it when I start my animations at 1 instead of 0. So you see we have our start at 1 and at 40. So now, if we go over here, and this might just be visible on your screen, but if it isn't, you can use your mouse wheel to move around on these bottom options. If we go over here, you can see this blank window with the 2 keys on it, and that's how we're going to be inserting our keyframes. Keyframes are bone or object positions in the animation where where the animation is going to be deriving the rest of itself from those positions. So that'll be more clear in a minute. And in general, I like to avoid inserting keyframes I don't actually need. So if I'm just rotating an object, then I don't really want to insert the location if I only really want the rotation. But I think we'll at least want location and rotation for all of these. So I'm just going to select all of these, and maybe even the root bone. I might do a little with that. Might be nice to make it do a little jitter when this thing's finished. So let's just select all of those and press I for insert. And that's going to insert our location and rotation because that's what we selected. You'll notice I also could have selected location, rotation, scale here. And sometimes I do like to animate this scale of an animation, but that probably won't be needed here. So, although, let me, nah, that would be weird. Okay, so, just make sure, Alt all of our transforms to make sure I haven't moved anything. So now those are inserted, and I think I'll just go right to the end of the animation And I'll just move all of these things to the state I want them to be when the animation's finished. So this is going to be right here when the animation's finished. And this is going to move down when the animation is finished. Let's see. And yeah, that won't interfere with the battery. So just get that nice and lined up. And let me think if there's anything else that I really want to change for this. Yeah, I think that's about it. So I'm going to just insert location rotation there. And now you can see I'm dragging this timeline around. And I'm actually pretty happy with that. So let's turn off this armature and just have a look at how these move. And it looks like our wire's intersecting this piece a little. So we're going to be changing that. Just pressing stop here. And let's see what happens. So, turn our armature back on. And I like to make my armature, I'll move this out so you can see it better. So this is our armature tab with the stick figure. And you can see these different tabs here. You've got different ways that your bones can look. I like to do stick when I'm animating things. So I changed that around so I can see my model better. Let's see when this wire first starts moving in a way I don't want. So over here, I'd really like these to be rotated out more so that, you know, they're not covering up this plate. Although maybe I could just have them coming this way instead and do that. Let's see if that'll work. And trying to manually rotate things that are set up for IK is always a little tricky. So selecting these, Alt-R to unrotate those. And let's try that again. There we go, so that might be enough. Just getting this nice and rotate a little more how I want it, like that. There we go, that's pretty good for this frame. And we'll probably need to mess with that a little more, but let's see what we can do. Insert. Let's see how that looks when I move it up and down now. And it's getting farther, but this is still intersecting a bit. So on this keyframe, I'm going to rotate this out a little more. And don't want the kink in the wire to be too drastic, so just messing with this some more. And let's see how that looks. So I'm just selecting the wires that I changed, pressing I for insert, moving this over. Let's see how that looks. We're almost there, but this part needs to be moved out a little more. But not too much. There we go, insert there. And let's have a look at that. All right, so that's starting to look right. But I think I'd like this wire to not block our gauge quite as much. So let's see if we can do that. So I might need to undo some of our work here. Just selecting all of these wires that I was working with, going to those keyframes where we changed them, and I'm doing Alt-I to remove those keyframes, doing the same here, and the same here, just for these ones. There we go. And I think I'd actually like these to rotate around a little more. Stay out of the way of the gear. So let's see what we can do with that. Right, that's more what we want, so select these, Alt-R, oh, but not that one. So move that around. And that might be, oh, not there. Move that up. There we go. And that way it's going to be blocking our gear a little less. So pressing I for insert, let's see what it does after that. So now it gets embedded in this again. So we got a little more work to do with this. And just seeing where I can rotate this, that is going to move it where I want it to get out of the way. There we go, that's not bad. And I'll just select all of these because I don't quite remember which one of these I changed around. And I can remove that later, so I for insert. And let's have a look at how this looks. So I think I'm liking that a lot better. It's feeling, it's feeling like it doesn't mess up the silhouette too much. So let's turn off this armature and have a look at what it's doing. Give me just a moment. There we go. And now we're going to move this down, see how it looks. I like what the wire's doing. Probably going to be more like this size in the game. So let's, I don't know, let's select something else, see how that looks. Well, that's pretty good, actually. Just gonna check around here for things clipping into each other. Now, one other thing I'm going to do is, let me see, you see with this animation, it isn't a smooth movement down. It starts slowly and it ends slowly. And it might not be too apparent, but the reason that it's doing that is because Unity 3D likes to interpolate between the keyframes, make a nice curve of movement instead of these jagged stops and jagged starts. And a lot of times that will make your animation look better. But in this case, I'm not just going to be playing the animation, but I'm going to make it so that it's corresponding to the amount of weight on it. So that's going to be a lot easier if it's just, starting immediately, going at the same speed and stopping immediately. So in order to change that around, we're going down here and going to our graph editor. And let me see if I can remember. That's interpolation mode. And I'm going to change that to linear. So you see we have some little curves down here. That's the movements of our bones, and a lot of times you want that. But in this case, we're going to interpolation mode, clicking on linear, and now you can see those are straight lines there. So let's have a look at how that changed our animation. So now I'm going to play that again, and let's have a look. So now, see, the animation actually looks a little worse because that the interpolation is actually kind of nice looking, but it's going to work a lot better with what I'm going to be doing with it, which is, saying it up so that the amount of the animation corresponds to how much weight is on it. So I'm going to pause that for a minute. And I notice that as this is going down, the shading's getting a little weird on it. And that's probably because we have all these vertices right in the middle of the face. So just pressing Alt R, Alt S, Alt G, make sure I undo all that movement. Going back up to our dope sheet with our action editor. And I'm just going to press this X for a minute to get rid of that animation. Now I'm going to just use the cut tool, make a few more vertices here. There we go. And I always like these to be lined up nicely. Cut tool here. Whoop, not there. I want this at the vertex. There we go. Cut tool here. Down here. Well, first let's move this up and down and see if it actually did anything. So going over to our dope sheet, get this animation back. But we want to select the armature for the animation. There we go. And I think that actually will look better. Still getting a little flickering there. See if I can figure that out. So just pulling this around, make sure we don't have anything doubled. And it looks like we don't. So just going to select this, undo the animation. I'm just going to add some few more cuts in this, make sure this shading stays right. And just eliminate all of those vertices that are just hanging out in the middle of nowhere. There we go, this one too. It should just be a few more here. This one. Pull this one across. And go over here. Seems our music stopped, so let's get that going again. There we go. So, going... Corridor City says it's haunted. So, then cutting this. Moving this up here. And I probably don't need to do these ones in back, but just for completeness, do this as well. There we go. Let's see if the shading looks a little better now. So now we're just going back to our animation, selecting my armature, and going down to these three little dots here, clicking on it, and clicking on our move down animation. Now, going over to our timeline, and let's have a look at what happens to those faces. So it seems that solved the problem. It's not shading weird anymore. Maybe I would like just a little bit of jitter when this thing gets to the bottom, so let's see what we can do with this. Yeah, you know, actually I probably won't do any good. However, maybe we could make this part a little more interesting. So right now it's just going straight up and down. But maybe I could add just a little bit of jitter to this. Whoa, not that much, get more interesting. Let's try that. If I can get fine enough control of this. So just a little over here, insert it. Then we're going to 20, move it in a little, insert, 30, move this out a little, insert. There we go, and let's see if that added anything interesting. So let's look at our animation again. And that's playing it backwards. That's kind of interesting. Although I don't, actually it should be fine. It's moving the colliders around a little in Unity. So I think that jitter is going to make it look a little more interesting there. Oh, and it looks like I messed this up a bit. So you see there's a piece intersecting here when it gets to the bottom. So that shouldn't be too difficult to fix. Let me just think about the best way to go about this. So I think it is stopping at the right place, and I do really like the angle on this. So I think I'll just make this part a little bit shorter, so just stop this animation here. And probably going to need to eliminate this shape mostly. But it's got a lot going on now, so I don't really think we'll be missing that shape too much. I'm just going to move this up a little bit more, see what that looks like. There we go, and is it still intersecting there? Not much. It actually looks like it's cleanly resting there. Maybe move it down a little more, give it just a really nice resting point. I'm just going to move into this one, see how it looks. And I think that's actually pretty good. It looks like that's a little more up. And this is really just fiddly stuff. I probably won't even be seen by the player, but I like these two. I like these speeds because I can make them before they go into the game. So let's have a look. There we go, and that's resting really nice on that part. So let's just go through this, have a few more looks at this, make sure nothing's moving weird. So now I can see a big problem here is that this gear tooth is totally cutting off the light bulb. So that's something else we'll need to fix up before this thing's finished. So let me think about the right way to do this. This part's probably going to need to move in a lot. So that's a good starting point. Just pull this in. And this part can pull in too. Just get that so it isn't being intersected by this gear coming down. We'll go ahead and pull these back as well. Yeah, maybe just line those up there. And let's see what else. So this light bulb's getting totally cut off there. So we absolutely don't want that happening. Going to just select all of this. And I think I'll actually make these a separate piece for now so that I can move them back with the light bulb cover properly. So making sure I got all of this selected. Now I'm going to press Control V, separate selection, and then moving this and the light bulb cover back. See if I can get them so that they're not getting cut off by this gear piece here. There we go. And I think I'll move this back a little more, pull it out more. Let's get it so that the light bulb's still visible when this thing's back all the way. Now selecting this and moving it over here, getting it lined up with this plate. There we go. And this can be joined back to the frame again. So just join. Alright, now let's have another look at this, see what's, if anything else is a little wonky. Just going to play this animation so I can get a good look at how all the pieces are moving. So that's looking nice. And just make sure nothing is clipping into anything else where it shouldn't be. And yeah, it's actually pretty cool. You know, this side piece actually kind of hangs off in space. Not really a problem, but I think I'll fix that. Just have a look. What's the best way to do this? Yeah, actually, I don't think it really looks weird. This is kind of floaty in space, but it looks pretty solid from any angle you look at it. So I think it's pretty clear that this is anchored somehow. Just checking around, making sure there's nothing else before we call this project done. And I think we're actually really good here. So now we've made our first animation. And our next project is going to be a robot. So it's going to have multiple animations like this. And maybe I'll just do a little looking for resource images, get started on that before we call it a day. So actually really happy with how this turned out here. Moving down nicely. And I'll just stop this animation. Oh, and there was one more thing before we really call it on this one. So we're going up to our dope sheet, selecting all of these. And let me see if I can find the option. Clean keyframes, and select all of these. Clean channels. And I'll just make sure that we don't have anything in there that we don't really need, just to keep that animation as small and efficient as it needs to be. So if you're joining us for the first time, we just finished one of our projects. This is a weight switch where you put an object on top of this in the game that I'm making, and then it just moves down. And when this reaches the bottom of its arc, it activates wires or doors or pretty much anything in the game. And I'm just noticing there's a little bit of clipping here. So I'm going to go back and make sure there isn't some place in here where this is intersecting too much. So you see now it's kind of going into that gear a little bit. So let's just see if there's a way we can fix that. I think I might have a pretty good idea of where that's coming from. So going over here and back to our graph editor, just select all of these. And let's see if we can do key interpolation mode. Maybe just a moment to get this one fixed. For some reason it's not giving me interpolation mode for this one. Let's just try loading this again, see if it works. Timeline. There we go. Yeah, maybe when I cleaned the keyframes, it messed something else up. So let's try undoing that. Move over here. It's still not quite there. Well, let's see if we can get this fixed. You know, this is the bone that's really doing it. So I'm just going to delete these keyframes with the wobble here and redo this part. So going to delete this keyframe, insert this one. There we go. Now it's back to the straight up and down. You can see it's not intersecting anymore. So Let's see if we can just add that wobble again. Well, first let's see if our interpolation mode's good. So, graph editor. Yeah, that was the issue. The cleaning the keyframes just totally got rid of the curve. So, do I actually want that wobble there? Well, no, I think it's better without it, come to think of it. So, going back to the graph editor and just selecting all of these keyframes. Going to interpolation mode, linear. And let's go back to our timeline, see how that looks. And does this intersect the gear? Yes, it does. So it looks like the same thing we did for the teeth, we need to do for the gear again. So remove this. What? Going to frame 41. Remove this. Going to insert the gear again there. And then go back to our graph editor and make sure that the gear is rotating the same way. So we're going to again turn the interpolation mode to linear, and let's hope that fixed our problem. So just taking a good look at the teeth, making sure they all mesh up nicely, and I think that's actually looking really good. A lot of animation stuff is just going back and forth, kind of troubleshooting, seeing, making sure everything's lining up well, and, you know, just incrementally getting more closer to the animation you want. So I'm really liking that. And I'm just going to press Control R, Control S, Control G, just to undo all of that movement. Go back to our action editor, press X here, and I think that's just about ready to put in the game. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. And let's start talking about our next project for the show. So we've just finished up Into the Machine. We made a much more complicated object than that chair we started with originally. And we also made a pretty simple animation, but you know, that was a little more complex than I was expecting when I originally laid out this project plan. So this one's all finished, and I am turning the lights into party mode to celebrate. We did it! Okay, so now we're moving on to our friendly... Ooh, that's no good. Going down. We're moving on to our... Man, this thing is not letting me move that up. Cool. We are moving on, if it kills us, to Friendly Robots next, the project right before Insidious Humans. So for this upcoming project, I'm going to be making a robot, one of my favorite things to do in Unity 3D. We're going to be making an armature for it, just like we did for this mechanical piece. And we're also going to be animating it. So the, you know, obviously it's going to be different because it's a different model. But the main technical thing that's we're going to be doing that I wasn't doing with this previous model is I'm going to have multiple animations all attached to this same object. So I can just put it into Unity 3D and, you know, rig it up. So sometimes it's hovering, sometimes, I don't know, it's grabbing with a claw or something. So I'm really excited about that. And let me see, just turning this off for a minute. So I think we're going to look for some resource images for this next. And just pull this over here. There we go. And let me think about what we want for this. So, the robot that I have in mind for this next project is going to be so this whole game takes place in this space station that's rotating to generate gravity. So it's this big ring and you're running around this space station. So the robot that I have in mind for this next project is this little robot that works to fix things that break on the station. So you remember I said I was working on wires, so if some of those break in the room, this robot fixes them. And if, if a gun turret gets destroyed, this robot fixes that. So, I'm thinking this robot's going to need the ability to just hover all over the place and go wherever things need fixing. Now, another aspect of the game is that sometimes rooms can decompress. So this robot's also, it's sometimes going to be moving around in air, sometimes in vacuum. So it can't really use a fan as its propulsion system, though something that moves in air might be part of that. Let me actually show you some of the other robots I've made so far. So just going up here and see documents, Unity projects, CC models. If I can find these. There we go, fan drone. So this is the one in the projects panel that I originally had for this. So you see it has these fans that it would be moving around to get around on the space station. But that's probably not really going to work here because sometimes it's in vacuum, and besides that, this one only shows up on the screen, well, if it's like this size. And we're going to want these fixer bots to be really tiny so we can get a lot of them in there. Let me show you something else if I can find it that, it might be lost. But, I was also thinking that, I've taken a few different cracks at this fixer bot. So the other one that I had set up was going to be crawling along the back wall, but that back wall kind of moves in and out, so you can't really count on it being in a set place. So I think what this is going to need is little jets for moving around, so it can move in vacuum or it can move in air. Though I might still like to incorporate some kind of little camera on it. So now that we've talked a little about what this is going to look like, let's get some images for this. So, what about a small jet engine? See what that looks like. Go over here, and I guess this is really more of a rocket engine. It's not going to have a jet intake. But, it's not really moving with reaction either. I'm thinking how this works is as little nozzles that are just releasing gas to move around. So, small gas jet maybe? Gas engine would probably just be gasoline engine. Let's see what that looks like. So this one's starting to get there. It's a jet burner, not really sure what that's for. Moving along, just seeing if we can't get something that might give us some ideas for what the parts on this should look like. So this might actually be one of the ones we wind up going with. So I'm going to be making a new bookmarks folder for this. Bookmarks. And add folder. Fixer, bot, resource, images. There we go. And just bookmarking this one. Going over here. And let's just, before we move on, see if there's anything else cool we'd like to maybe draw a little inspiration from. And again, with these resource images, it's probably gonna wind up looking pretty different from any of these, but I like just having a little something to go for if I'm looking for ideas about how something should be set up. So, other keywords that I like are industrial. I like looking for a lot of stuff with industrial in the keyword. So let's see if we got anything else cool here. That's a little busy. This is gonna be pretty small on screen. But that does have some cool stuff in it. That one's pretty neat too. I don't know if we'll have room for a whole lot of wires and stuff like that in it. But that's another good jet where maybe we can take some shapes from there. See if there's anything else good in here. Yeah, maybe move on. So, another aspect of this is that they're going to be really small on screen, right? Probably smaller than the player. So they're going to be moving around in swarms a lot of the time. So, you know, we're going to be more interested in how this thing silhouettes than like working out really specific details here. So, one thing that these are going to do when they're swarming around is one of them, it picks up a piece of debris that it's cleaning up, like a shell from a gun or something. And the other ones swarm over it, and they try to take that shell away from it. And, you know, it's not gonna happen all the time. That's gonna be a fun flourish. So these things are kind of scavengers like crows. So let's just get a few crow images in here. And maybe flock of crows, murder of crows. What we're not so much interested in is what a single crow looks like, but what they look like when they're fighting over something. So crows fighting in the air, maybe? There we go. So let's just have a look and see if we can't, I don't know, get some interesting ideas for ways that this thing can move, ways that can look where, you know, it kind of mirrors this idea of crows fighting. So they'd probably be fighting over a piece of string or something. Oh no, this is a little ham-fisted, but just trying to get an image that really sums up what we want here. Trash. Food, maybe. There we go. That's a cool one. Oh, yeah. There we go. So something like that. Let's see what else we can get from this one. So I don't know if they're really going to I don't think they're gonna be quite that big. So, let me think. I don't know if they're really going to be very crow-like, maybe a little more insect-like, but see if that does anything. Yeah, something like that. So, what kind of insect would this be? I don't know, maybe a little dragonfly-like, so let's have a dragonfly in there too. Just get a lot of, you know, inspiration from different insects. Let me think what else we can get in here. So it's also going to have some kind of robot claw. And that's also going to draw its inspiration a little more from bugs, so just find a bug with, I don't know, some kind of interesting leg structure, or I wasn't planning on it, but I really do like the shape of this beetle. That's pretty cool. Let me see. Fly, maybe. Oh, Corridor City is suggesting a harvester fly. Let me see if I can find one of those. Harvester fly. Now there's one of these with the long legs. Yeah, these ones are pretty small. Let me see. Long-legged fly. There we go. So something like this might be a good inspiration for how the grabber claw is supposed to be set up. So let me see what else. Thinking that might be good for it. So we got a lot of different resource images of animals, crows, beetles, flies. And like I said, this is going to be seen more in its silhouette and the shape of the flock. So we're not going to focus too much on the details in this one. But maybe, no, I think that's about good for today. So, next time we'll get started on making this robot. And it's possible we'll even finish it that time. We'll see. Like I said, I want this to be, it's gonna be pretty simple because there's a lot of them on screen. Oh, search fly long leg instead. Let's see what we can get there. Going back to our screen capture. So, fly long leg. See what that turns up. But wrong web browser. Okay. Fly long leg. Images. And, oh, I see, yeah. Those are cool. So, maybe we'll add something from that in there too, just finding a good one. Yeah, I get one where it really looks like it's splayed out, grabbing something. So another reason, I really like this one, and another interesting thing is that you've got these rigid bits, and then you have these more flexible pieces coming off. So I could really see that working out for a cool arm design. So I think that's plenty of resource images. So as always, thank you for joining us. if you'd like to get updates about when the show goes live and probably some other information about what I'm doing in the game and, just other information about my work and life and what I'm up to, please follow me on Twitter over on the right side of the screen. You can also watch past episodes here on Twitch or also on the YouTube link below my head on the Twitch page. And if you like the show, please tell your friends, tell your family. We'd really like to get more people watching and excited and just talking about the projects they're doing and anything else here. So, thank you so much. Have a great day. And as always, be the apex predator of your own ecosystem.